Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Neil Haley Show. And again, you can go to my website, toldtutor.net, for more information. Twitter, Told Tutor, Neil S. Haley, Facebook, LinkedIn, Neil Haley, Instagram, Told Tutor, and Google Plus, Neil Haley. And it's so interesting partnering with Triumph Books and the amazing authors that I get to talk about, and simulcasting again with the Toll Education Network, radio network that's syndicated in X amount of stations, and then the television stations that are syndicated. I'm excited to have this guest on the program. And I mean, when we're talking about Arkansas, Razorback, football, and basketball, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I want to welcome to the program author Rick Schaefer, author of 100 Things Arkansas Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die. Rick, thanks for calling, and how are you?
Doing great, Neil. You know, it's funny because that title was suggested to me. All I did was write the book. Somebody else titled it. I've been asked several times if maybe you should just do 99 of them.
Why
because
90?
Because if you do all 100, you have to do those before you die. So what comes next, right?
Well, that's so true, Rick. And when you think about that, and this is the blueprint. And then it's interesting with Triumph Books. I've done so many different 100 things, and and I'm a huge fan of Razorback basketball. Meaning when I was remembering, filling out the brackets and seeing the winning teams. But then when you think about football and different things, but I wanted to go right quickly to tell a little bit of your background, because you're very well known in Arkansas. Sports information director, am I correct? To give me some more of your background, and then we'll get into some specifically the book.
Yeah, I did. I was sports information. I worked in sports information for 24 years. I was assistant for 3 years, then SID for 21. And I was one of the few, when I first got into the business, if you traveled with the basketball team, you were automatically the color guy on the network. And so I ended up doing that all through my SID days. Brought me back for a while after that. Last year was the last year I did it, but so I did Razorback basketball on radio too for 34 years.
Holy cow! Wow.
And I've done about 10 years of Razorback football color, and now I still work on the network and do pregame, halftime, and postgame. Still work Razorback baseball broadcasts. In fact, today is opening day for Razorback baseball later this afternoon, and I don't know how cold it is in Pittsburgh. It's supposed to be in the 50s here, so it's going to be a nice day for baseball. And so that's pretty well my background. I still do drive time sports here in Arkansas, which is statewide, daily from 4 to 7.
Well, one background, I lived in Jonesboro, Arkansas when I was a professional wrestler. So that's one thing. And there was like a minor league pro wrestling league that I wrestled for. And I was on Jonesboro TV and lived and hung out in Paragould and all the different places in Arkansas. So it's a shout out to my days in Arkansas. So I understand specifically never headed out to where Arkansas was. I was more in the areas near, right before the Memphis border and stuff like that. And
right. Yeah.
Sure.
Jonesboro's across the state. It's about 4.5 hours from us. But even though it's interesting because of, and we detail this in the book, because of what John Barnhill and then Frank Broyles did to build statewide support in Arkansas, even those who live in Jonesboro, where Arkansas State is, there's still a lot of Razorback fans over there. So it's pretty well a statewide phenomenon.
It's kind of like Penn State. When you come to Pittsburgh, there's still tons of Penn State fans for sure. And Arkansas State just started to win. Really, they didn't have a program per se when I lived there for sure. Now, the first thing I will bring up is specifically when I think of Arkansas sports, I think of Nolan Richardson. That's who I truly think of. And I'm sure there's a bunch of different little things about Nolan Richardson in the book, isn't there?
Very definitely. Again, I had the privilege of being the SID for them for the first 17 years he was there, all but the last 2. And certainly we had some great memorable moments. In fact, when you think about college basketball and you think about the elites of college basketball, you think of Duke, you think of UCLA, Kansas, Kentucky, obviously. They think they invented the game in Kentucky, even though I guess Bog Allen in Kansas did, or so Naismith did, and coached at Kansas. You think maybe of Indiana in the past, maybe a handful of teams. But when you think about the elite that win all the time, North Carolina, when you think about the teams that win all the time, there's only about 6 to 8 of them that come to your mind. But for a 6-year period under Nolan Richardson, Arkansas won more games than anybody in college basketball. And they beat them all. They beat Duke. They beat North Carolina. They beat all those great teams that you start thinking about. I never played Indiana, but They had an unbelievable run, and during those 6 years, Arkansas won the national championship, finished second another year, went to the Final Four another year, went to the Elite another year.
Amazing.
It was just amazing what happened during that period. And since that 6-year period, Arkansas has been good at times, but nothing like that. So what Nolan did should never have happened, because a school like Arkansas has never cracked the national elite. You can go around the country and name a lot of schools. Maybe they're good for a year or two, but not at that level. So you just have to give him a lot of credit. He's in the College Basketball Hall of Fame now. He deserves to go in a long time ago. And so, yes, there are a lot of details about those years in the book.
And that's where I think put Arkansas on the map when it came to basketball. Like you said, they were so elite and unbelievable when you mentioned those other universities. And what made Nolan's team so amazing is they were up and down the floor, exciting. They were kind of like, if you kind of parallel UNLV a time before, they were exciting basketball team, got up and down the floor fast, had great guards, great big men, and really were fun to watch for sure.
Very definitely fun to watch. It's really interesting because Arkansas, when Nolan got here, was in the Southwest Conference, and that's a big part of the book too, because that was probably the most dramatic thing that has happened at Arkansas, maybe ever in athletics, was switching from the Southwest Conference to the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah.
But when Nolan was here, the last 3 or 4 years of the Southwest Conference, nobody could beat Arkansas in basketball, or really a lot of other sports too. Then they went to the Southeastern Conference, and Rick Pitino was at Kentucky, and Kentucky was the elite. They were winning all the time, and when you looked at the SEC, there would be a school or two that would rise up for a year or two, and then they'd sink back down. But Kentucky just dominated.
Oh, yeah.
Arkansas's first 4 years in the SEC, Arkansas beat Kentucky every year. And there were two different divisions then, East and West, and so you only played them once. Beat them twice at Rupp, beat them twice in Fayetteville. And it created quite a rivalry. And what was interesting is, and Pitino's an up-tempo coach as well, but after Arkansas won the national championship in 94, went back in 95, played for the national championship, lost to UCLA. The year or two later, when Kentucky won under Pitino, Kentucky's style looked a lot like Arkansas.
Exactly.
And it was funny because a lot of people were giving Pitino credit for all of that, and he was taking little bits and pieces of what was getting done to him by Arkansas and putting it in his own system.
It's so true. Again, we're talking to Rick Schaefer, author 100 Things Arkansas fans should know and do before they die. And I'd love to know in the Pittsburgh area, as well as our television audience, how many are Arkansas fans. But again, I show my sports knowledge with basketball. I'm going to have some questions of football because we're especially going to have, and maybe you can go into some of the time, Rick, because we do have 2 segments with you about, some of your time and your greatest memories in Arkansas sports. Because football still, I think now their program in football, so we'll talk about the future. But I'm so into, again, Nolan Richardson. Think about your arena and how unbelievably difficult it was to beat Arkansas in that 6-year period of that arena, right? It was crazy. Those fans were nuts.
Yeah, well, it really was. And during that 6 years, Arkansas played in 2 arenas. The first was in Barnhill Arena.
Barnhill, I remember.
Barnhill Arena seated 9,000.
Really?
And it sounded like 20,000. And there are very few times, I'm sure Duke probably has had this happen, and maybe some other buildings, where it's almost like the fans in that building will you to win.
Yeah.
And because I've seen teams that were better than Arkansas come into Barnhill, and amazing things would happen. And it started with Eddie Sutton. And Sutton really built the foundation. He took a team to the Final Four in 1978, won 3 straight conference championships, 77, 78, 79. We had it's interesting, they were nicknamed the Triplets, even though that was only 3 games before they quit playing with each other. Al McGuire saw the 1978 team, and he was going to work the regional final. And he saw Sidney Moncrief, Ron Brewer, and Marvin Delph, and they were all 6'4", all great players, and he nicknamed them the Triplets. Well, they only played 3 more games after that, and then Brewer and Delph were gone, and Moncrief came back. But those teams played in Barnhill Arena, and when Nolan came, Barnhill Arena was there. His first 2 years were pretty tough. Then he started winning, and the 1990 Final Four team played in Barnhill. And frankly, when Arkansas went to the SEC, and Frank Broyles, the athletic director, knew something had to be done to increase the capacity for basketball, Nolan was very reluctant to go out of Barnhill.
Right.
Because from
exactly.
a coach's standpoint, man, you got that kind of home court advantage. What do you want to leave that for?
Kind
So they talked about it.
Right. Kind of like Fitzgerald Fieldhouse when they moved to the Peterson Event Center. That basically it was really a tough place, and they're playing major Big East schools. And then when they moved, but so he was reluctant because people were so closer to the floor. It was that kind of a home court advantage that the other team just felt like it was deafening, the sound, because they were so close to the players, right?
That's right. But here's what happened. So Frank Broyles, when he went to the Architect, he said, I want twice the size of Barnhill, but I want Barnhill.
Yeah.
And so when they built Bud Walton Arena, this is almost hard to believe architecturally. But when they built it, and when they realized that more people wanted tickets, here's the hottest thing in Arkansas at that time was Razorback basketball. So they ended up constructing a 19,200 seat arena. This is back, and 94 was the first, 93, 94 was the first season Arkansas played there, and they ended up winning the national championship. And the highest seat in Bud Walton Arena is closer to the floor than the highest seat in Barnhill was. And so you've still got a compact sense,
right,
and the fans are still right there on top of you. And when Arkansas is good, and they're pretty good this year, 19-5, they're awfully tough to beat in that building.
And then we're going to talk about the future of Arkansas sports in the second segment, so you have that opportunity to plug. You can see I loved talking traditions, and that tradition team with Nolan Richardson was unbelievable. And I think that the Peterson Event Center was modeled after the new arena in Arkansas. I'm almost positive.
Really?
Yes, because they wanted to have that kind of and that's one of the hardest places to play is the Peterson Event Center as well. And when we talk about conference realignment and things like this, but when you talk Arkansas basketball, I want to get to some of the players when we get back, Rick. And my memories of Arkansas, I would say probably I became a fan in history of the Arkansas Razorbacks just because of living in Arkansas later on and then going back and reminiscing. But I think that a lot of people love to hate them across the country because of who are these guys? Why are they so good? They're up-tempo on the floor. And I think that what Coach Nolan Richardson really wanted to bring was a kind of thing as Mike Krzyzewski, tough defense, really hard-nosed on the floor. And you got these other schools and for Arkansas being on top. And I bet you it was amazing to see that. So when we get back, we're going to be talking more with Rick Schaefer, author of 100 Things the Arkansas fans should know and do before they die. And I always say that long title, but these books, if you're a fan, you got to check them out. You're watching Neil Haley Show, and when we get back, more with Rick Schaefer. We'll be back.
Bethel Park High School, and we have a special invitation for you.
We would like you to join us for the Bethel Park Cheerleaders and Boosters 25th Annual Spring Fashion Show that benefits Allegheny County Special Olympics.
This year's Sweetest Adventure theme show will be held on Sunday, March 22nd, 2015.
It will be held at the Independence Middle School's auditorium. Doors open at noon.
Tickets are $5 for adults and $3 for students.
We have had incredible support from the community for this annual event in years past, and all proceeds go directly to this very worthwhile charity.
Last year, the fashion show resulted in a donation of $9,000.
Bethel Park Cheerleading Boosters Association's total donation from the past 2 decades has raised more than $176,000.
Your support on behalf of this very important cause will help to raise money to enrich the lives of Special Olympic athletes throughout Allegheny County.
Through your support, these very special athletes will be given opportunities to train and compete in 19 different sports throughout the year.
Each year, we invite an ambassador to participate in this exciting charitable event. This year, we have 3 special guests.
We are pleased to introduce our 2015 Special Olympic athletes and Jessica Clayton, who is the Special Olympics of Allegheny County Global Messenger. Our special ambassadors are Aiden Marple and Molly Mathias.
There is a wonderful afternoon planned with fashion from many local stores.
Please come to see us model at the fashion show while you help support the Allegheny County Special Olympics, which has done so much to support Special Olympic athletes.
There is also a fabulous basket auction and light refreshments.
Our primary source of fundraising comes from the basket auction, where the baskets are made from items donated by local businesses.
Please join us on Sunday, March 22nd at 1 p.m. at Independence Middle School. For tickets, please see any Bethel Park cheerleader or call Devin Rutherford at 412-851-1276. Please support Special Olympics. Go Hawks!
We're back to the Neil Haley Show, and I guess one of the biggest dreams in the world is a sports nut like I am to get the opportunity to interview sports authors. Thank you again, Triumph Books. And it shows what sport I loved growing up, and that's basketball. And if Rick would know, I was 6'10", played Division III college basketball. I will remember teams, even though I didn't like them per se, because I was a Duke fan, and Leitner and Krzyzewski, and specifically because that team with all those different things. But I would remember Arkansas. So let's go to some of the players, because some of them really had great NBA careers. I forgot about the history you talked about in the 70s with players that went on to play in the NBA. So I'm sure in the book it talks about some of your NBA players that went on to play in the NBA, right? For sure.
It definitely does, but not obviously covering their NBA career, but just their careers at Arkansas. Yes. And probably our most prominent NBA player ever was Sidney Moncrief.
Yes.
Sidney was he was an unusual player in that he lifted the level of play of the entire team. I mentioned the triplets in our first segment, Moncrief, Brewer, and Delph. Moncrief was a year younger, and in 1979, Brewer and Delph were gone. Moncrief and one other senior, Steve Shaw, were there with a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, and yet they once again, it's almost like Sidney willed them to wins. They went 25-5, played Indiana State, number one in the country, Larry Bird, in the regional finals, and Bird went off. He scored 33 points on the Razorbacks. So what Arkansas did in the last 6.5 minutes of the game, they put Sidney on him. He never touched the ball. It was amazing. Oh, wow. And Arkansas ends up losing on the last second shot. They couldn't get the ball to Bird. A guy named Neil Heaton hit the shot. It bounced off both rims and finally went in. And so Sidney went on to a great NBA career, mostly with the Milwaukee Bucks. I think he was on the All-NBA defensive team 5 times. He was NBA Defensive Player of the Year once. Still very well known and a superstar up in Milwaukee. He still does radio for the Bucks games. Mm-hmm. So he was probably our best. Corliss Williamson was probably, when you think about the two greatest Razorbacks, you think of Moncrief, you think of Williamson, because Corliss played on that national championship team in '94, and he had a good NBA career. It wasn't anything overwhelming, but it was a good NBA career. Darrell Walker was a longtime NBA player from Arkansas. Darrell played on one of the Chicago Bulls World Championship teams with Michael Jordan. Todd Day and Lee Mayberry played on the Razorback teams that went to the Final Four in 1990 and won four straight conference championships, 3 in the Southwest Conference and 1 in the SEC. Day and Mayberry had good NBA careers. Weren't superstars, but they were good players, and both played for the Bucks and then later played with other teams. Oliver Miller was on that team.
I loved Oliver Miller because I was a big man.
Yeah.
And to explain to our listeners the size of Oliver Miller. I mean, a giant of a man, not just height-wise, but weight and girth for sure.
Unfortunately, he probably ate himself out of the NBA because he did have a little too much girth. But Oliver was 6'9", and when he came to Arkansas, probably about 275. When he left, probably about 330. And Oliver had probably the biggest hands of any Razorback I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And he had the ability, this was what made him so good in Nolan's system. He could rebound, and one-handed, he could throw a 50 or 60-foot pass on the button to a guy streaking down the other end and get an easy layup. And I think about that 92 Kentucky game, the first time Arkansas played Kentucky in the SEC, the games at Rupp Arena, and they did it time after time. Kentucky shooting, Big O rebounds, heaves it down the floor, and Todd Day's dunking on the other end. So, you know, and again, he was a good NBA player.
Right.
Could have been better if he could have kept his weight down just a little bit.
I mean, that's the one I remember because I watched the big men. I was emulating the big men. And his big man moves were amazing. He was so smooth and agile on his feet for as much weight as he had. And you remind yourself specifically, but you're right, ate himself out of the NBA because he was such a big man. And I'm sure that Coach Nolan Richardson has some stories of trying to keep that weight off at times for sure in Arkansas. Any other NBA players after you talked about?
Well, Ron Brewer played about 9 or 10 years in the NBA. He played with the San Antonio Spurs. You all remember George Gervin, the Iceman. Yes. And Gervin got hurt one time, and Brewer played the same position as Gervin. And Gervin had all those games where he scored 30-something points or 40-something points. When Brewer filled his spot, he did the same thing. He only got to do it for about 5 or 6 games because Gervin came back. He probably wanted to make sure he kept his job. But he'd score in the 30s. But he had a pretty good long career, played with Portland. And then Joe Johnson, who currently plays for the Brooklyn Nets, actually only played a year and a half at the University of Arkansas. He didn't get eligible immediately after he graduated from high school, didn't have the ACT score, but then he made it during the first semester, played the second semester at Arkansas, played on the only Arkansas team that's ever won the SEC tournament. Arkansas has been really good in the regular season, but that 3 or 4 day grind, they've never been able to win it. They've been to the championship game several times. But he played on that team, and he's, you could call him a star with the Nets right now.
Yeah, he probably is going to be rivaled as the second best Arkansas Razorback in the NBA, looking at the NBA career, because you got Sidney Moncrief, and if he continues to do what he's doing, that'll be those two for sure. For our listeners out there, the book is not just about Arkansas basketball. I'm just a huge basketball fan. But football-wise, I did cheer for the Razorbacks when I was wrestling in Jonesboro, because the Razorbacks were an 8-3, 7-4 types of teams at different times. But the new program, the new Razorbacks, are really starting to win again, aren't they, Rick? They're starting to come back.
Yeah, when Arkansas went into the SEC, they were ready in every sport except football. For whatever reasons, Ken Hatfield had left after the 1989 season. Arkansas had won 2 straight Southwest Conference championships. Ken wins in 88 and 89. When he left, Coach Broyles, for the only time in his career as athletic director, he always had a policy: if you hire a head coach. Well, he hired the offensive coordinator, and rather than go get a head coach, that didn't work out too well. And so in 1992, Arkansas went in the SEC and was struggling a little bit. Danny Ford came in and really built a nice foundation. Never won the Western Division one year, but then when Houston Nutt came in 1998, then Arkansas kind of got started again. And had 2 or 3 years with Darren McFadden and Felix Jones in the same backfield, and really, really good in those years. Then down a couple of years, and here came Bobby Petrino. And Petrino had 2 great years at Arkansas. And, when you're in the SEC and you look at the Western Division, there was a time last year in the polls when 6 of the 7 teams in the Western Division were all in the top 25. And that's what you're playing against every week.
That's tough. That's tough schedule for sure.
Yeah. So when Petrino left, he left the program in bad shape, no doubt about it. Brett Bielema was a total surprise hire. I'm not sure anybody thought he'd ever leave Wisconsin. And his first year was tough, but now you can see things coming back. Last year, they went from 3 wins his first year to 6 wins last year, got a 7th win in a bowl game. And since Arkansas and Texas were longtime rivals, and you go back to the 60s, they had some of the greatest games ever in college football, but they don't play each other anymore. Well, they got paired up in the Texas Bowl in Houston. That was a big deal for Razorback fans. Over half the stadium, they sold it out. First time they'd ever sold out the Texas Bowl. And over half the stadium was Arkansas fans. And for Arkansas thumped Texas 31-7. And so Bielema, how coaching goes, you're a hero for a while. Well, he's a hero for this while. And you could see the program coming back, solid with offensive linemen, solid with defensive linemen. And that's where you build from. Good running game. And so I think there's a bright future for Razorback football, but you also have to remember the SEC, you can be great one year and you can be down the next, because it is a dog-eat-dog league, and everybody's got resources, everybody's got good coaching, it's a tough league to win consistently in.
It definitely is. And what would you say was the greatest years in Arkansas football?
Well, it'd be in the 60s. In the decade of the 1960s, and that was Frank Broyles became head coach in 1958. But in the decade of the 1960s, Alabama won more games than anybody in college football. Bear Bryant was the coach. Texas was second, and Arkansas was third.
Oh my!
Of all the teams in college football, and Texas had one more win than Arkansas. And during that decade, Arkansas beat Texas twice when they were ranked twice when they were ranked number one in the country. So they were really, really good. Had great teams. Back then, there were 4 New Year's Day bowl games. That was it. And they had a few other bowls, but your 4 New Year's Day bowl games. So if you can imagine, you're in the Southwest Conference. At times, Texas won the league and Arkansas was second.
Right.
But during that decade of the 60s, Arkansas went to the Cotton Bowl 3 times. They went to the Sugar Bowl 4 times. That means out of only 8 teams playing on New Year's Day, they did it 7 times. And other than Alabama, nobody else did that.
Wow. That's amazing. And I would say Petrino's time is when they finally, the program is starting to really come back. And now we're seeing it again specifically. And for our Pitt fans listening out there, your offensive coordinator is heading to Pitt. What do you think of your offensive coordinator? At least you said they made a run at the end. What kind of style coaching? He's done it in a couple places, hasn't he? The offensive coordinator, yeah.
Yeah, he and I can tell you it's interesting because Brett Bielema would probably like to throw the ball. I'd say run the ball a minimum of 60% of the time, and in that, he still feels like you got to run for 200 yards and pass for 200 yards if you're going to be successful. But he'd like to run it 60% of the time, and I would say that the offensive coordinator that Pittsburgh is getting would like to pass a little bit more than 40% of the time.
I like that.
And, so I don't know how Jim Chaney's offense will look at Pittsburgh, but I think you just have to say it, there were probably times when Chaney wanted to throw it and Bielema wanted to run it. But Bielema did give Chaney that authority. It was his, he could make the calls that he wanted to. So Chaney probably, I don't know how that will mix with your head coach at Pittsburgh, but he's a guy that probably would be a 50-50 guy.
So that's perfect because the Pitt's offense is unbelievable. The running game's great, and then also we have one of the best wide receivers. So very good news for Pitt, especially getting an offensive coordinator that's very, very talented, to say the least. So, Rick, the best place to find information on you is to go to triumphbooks.com, or do we have any places else that we can find you, Rick? Do you have a Twitter or any of that stuff?
Nobody needs to have information on me. They want to have information on the Razorbacks, and that's the thing that I've done my whole career is talked about other people. And so I'm not, tell them to enjoy the book. They can get that on Amazon.com in your audience. I doubt if they have it in your local Barnes & Nobles. They're in Barnes & Noble and Walmarts all over Arkansas, but
I'm sure
you can get it through Amazon.com, and there's a brief bio of the author. But to me, the great thing about writing books is telling the stories of other people, and that's what I really love to do.
Well, you're a great storyteller. I enjoyed talking with you, and I'm sure for a Pittsburgh person, I knew a lot about the basketball team, didn't I?
I'm surprised.
I had a fun conversation about all that. So thanks again for calling, and take care, okay?
All right, Neil. Thank you.
I can't believe that's the end of the Neil Haley Show. Website, toldtutor.net. We'll see you next week. Good day, everyone.